this episode, I have two phenomenal South Africans who definitely know how to make money moves. Yes, I'm talking about the strong ones. They will be the ones sharing their expert knowledge to help you take better care of your finances so that you and the people in your life can live better. The first panelist that we have is Abulela Gazi. He is a dynamic business leader who is the head of business and client solutions at Metropolitan, and he's a member of the Curial Society of South Africa. Yes, those mathematics people. His know-how is perfect for people looking to manage their money better and become financially stronger. Our second panelist is Dambuza, whose story is one of rising hope, resilience, and hard work. She's the author of world-acclaimed book, Baked in Pain, a memoir about how she rose above her circumstances to become a globally celebrated businesswoman and humanitarian, as well as a host on YouTube. And this channel is called Vastly Sage. She has held various senior roles in all four major banks in South Africa, so her financial knowledge is very vast. Now, to everyone at home, please feel free to send any of your questions about finances, about making money move stronger so that collectively we become financially stronger in 2021. Make sure that you send those and they will gladly answer them. So welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Let's talk money.
Let's
talk money. I think everyone's been looking forward to this episode specifically. We've had one about hustling, which sort of does tie into money. We've had one about mental health, mental wealth, mental well-being. And I think the third one is a very important one because we're talking about money now. But different things happened with regards to money in 2020. What are some of the big problems, Amanda, that you recognized in terms of finances and money in 2020?
Well, I love the conversation about money, firstly. So thank you so much for having me. It's been a really difficult time for families. It's not just lives that are lost; it's livelihoods. You know, it's kids not being able to go back to school because parents can't afford the school fees anymore. It's not really being able to put food on the table. So it's gone down to really basics, and that's been incredibly difficult to watch. And you know, businesses foiling and just watching the mood around. I mean, you go to a restaurant, and what used to be a packed restaurant and you couldn't even find a spot is now like completely empty. So there's been a significant amount of loss, and also people then having to dip into monies they probably saved if they were lucky, which creates even more uncertainty for the future, because if you've dipped into that, then you know, where are you going to get it? Where do you go from here? So it's been incredibly difficult.
It's a bit of a funny one because you've mentioned different aspects of society being touched. Abulela, what are those different pockets and how have they been touched? I mean, personally, you know, if you're a person that is an MC, for instance, I'm a guy that has to be at events. All of last year, there have been no events. If I'm a DJ, there are no events I can DJ at. So how have the different sectors been touched?
No, exactly. I mean, depending on which sector you belong to dictated how you were impacted. So the more formally employed, perhaps were safer during this period because especially if your business is resilient and has got a strong balance sheet, you are able to keep people on board. But the reality is some businesses weren't that strong. The reality is some people unfortunately lost their jobs during this time, which then obviously has a ripple effect, especially in South Africa, when you consider that we support so many other families in South African culture. So it's not just that individual losing their job, it's the families after that that are also impacted. But to your point, if you belong to the entertainment industry, all of a sudden your avenue to generate revenue, to generate income has now been shut because people aren't going to shows, people aren't going to watch, you know, all these performances that you perhaps maybe, you know, providing for society. So I do think everyone has been impacted. Yes, there are those that have lost their jobs, but also from an inflation perspective. I'm not sure if I'm the only one, but every time I go shop, it feels like everything has gone up. It feels like I've got less in my pocket at the end of the month. And that impacts everyone. So whilst, yes, people would have lost their jobs, everyone then is impacted by what I call food inflation, which can be quite hard.
So things have changed from you being able to walk into a store with a trolley. You now take a basket because you realize that actually it's no longer that kind of game. Things have changed from you buying your branded items to maybe not having so many of those anymore. You'll take the more generic products.
And you start limiting the children. You're like, why must you eat 3 times a day?
It's gotten to that point, hasn't it? But let's talk about personal setbacks. I think there are different experiences different people will have, but what have you personally experienced with the setbacks that came with COVID, with 2020, and I guess maybe even the past few years, because all of this is sort of a hit, especially in our different personal lives?
Well, I mean, I'm an entrepreneur, and I mean, I've been in business. I've had my first business when I was 23 years old, and I was selling flowers, you know, and I've kind of become accustomed to entrepreneurship. But it gets even more difficult when you have people relying on you. And, you know, I've got a medium-sized business. I've got multiple businesses where I employ people. And you're constantly worried about, you know, the economy needs to turn, clients need to go back to work so that we start we get it moving again. So in terms of COVID, I think, you know, I haven't had any, well, of course, the revenue is down, you know, 36% or 40%. But the truth is that when you're coming off a very strong base, you are able to absorb the shock. You know, so for example, I didn't have to take leave from my staff. I didn't have to withhold their bonuses. I didn't have to, you know, retrench anyone so far. So thank God for that. But I think it really has impacted all of us. But I must tell you, I'm no stranger to hardship. You know, I'm no stranger to losing money. I remember very well when I was one of my businesses. In fact, I left corporate initially back in 2008 to start a business, and I was in Cape Town at the time. And I went into, I opened a linen store. It was fantastic. And then I had a franchise business as well. I quit my job full time, and I was like, that's it. I'm doing entrepreneurship now full time. And let's just say 6 months later, I had to close that franchise business in a mall. And the landlord wanted their rent. I was 6 months into a 3-year lease, and I drowned close to R1 million in that business. And you know, it was incredibly difficult. It was the first year of our marriage. We had twin girls who were 7 months old when I did this. So it's, let's just say entrepreneurs have a crazy streak in them. But you know, I had so much belief. I knew it was going to work out, but it didn't work out. And this is life. This is what happens. Sometimes you take that risk, it doesn't pay off. And you know, you should be able to understand that those moments will come. And it's what have you got in the tank to withstand them. So I've suffered, and by the way, it wasn't money from the bank, it was money from us. When I say us, it was my husband's bonuses of many years that I drowned in our first year of marriage. We're still married today, 14 years later.
Have you paid back the money?
I think I've paid back with double the interest, okay?
Great. Abulela, let's talk about you. Personally, how do finances work?
So personally, the first and most important thing is to budget. I find from our conversations with family, with friends, with some customers, that we don't budget as well as we should. It's kind of a high level. I'm getting this amount a month. Yes, I pay this and that. Hopefully I should be okay. And I think this lax nature in approaching budgeting is what is hindering us as a society. Because the more you understand where your income is coming from, the more you understand your expenses in detail. So each expense line to say, I'm paying this, when I go out, I will spend in a month $1,000. That detail is so important because it keeps you accountable. And I think that's a one big mistake we make as South Africans, is that we don't get into that detail. It also gives you a sense of where you're spending the money and what you actually shouldn't be spending money on. So for example, I'll use myself. I enjoy playing golf. And every time we look at my budget between myself and my wife, she looks at that line and says, this is too much, right? And it allows us to have those conversations as a family, allows us to understand where we are as a family, and then plan for the future. So it's important to have that detailed budget, each expense line item, understanding what it is, understanding exactly, where you'll be spending your money for a particular period of time.
So I think one thing that 2020 taught us is the fact that we are in an automatic forced reset, where we are placed in a situation where we're not necessarily planning to be the budgeting type. You're not planning to save money. You're not planning to think outside the box, to be a hustler, to try get things going. But we found ourselves in that position. So how does one start afresh? How do I, as someone that has gone through some sort of financial turmoil or the other over the past year or two, start afresh? What are the things that I need to start doing to say, right, I need money. How am I going to get it?
So firstly, I think, we must acknowledge and mourn our loss, because it's been a significantly trying time. and a lot of people have, got retrenched, and I think you must accept the loss, face it and accept it, because a lot of people end up being in denial and saying, you know what, it didn't happen to me, I'm going to be fine. They don't go and look into that overall picture.
Yes.
So, okay, I'm no longer going to have X amount of income,
Yes.
but this is how much debt I've got, this is how much liabilities I've got, this is what I have to pay for the school fees and all that. And I think you have to confront it, get a real picture.
Sure, confront
And it is scary. It is terrifying, in fact, because, before COVID happened, people were just, even if you have a rough budget, you live, you go for that extra dinner that you didn't plan, that's going to cost you 4,000 rands. Things have changed. And you have to now look at what are your liabilities, how much money is still coming in, and if you were retrenched, how much money have you got in there and how far can it go? Talk to your creditors. Burying your head in the sand and avoiding people that you owe money is not going to help you, because in the long term, it's going to impact your credit record, your credit score. It's going to, nobody's going to want to lend you any money. And at some point, you're probably going to have to go and get that good debt in order to get yourself back on a good footing. Perhaps you want to start a new business, but be realistic about where you are and speak to a professional about putting together a financial plan. What are your financial goals, and cut down on your living expenses. There are things you can do without.
So what does that mean? I mean, we're always being told to cut down on our living expenses, but I am a 35-year-old man who's got a wife. I work in a different place. She works in a different place. We have to live in a house.
Yes.
So when this is a house we've bought, by the way. So what do you mean I must cut down my living expenses, Amanda?
So the point is that if you no longer have the income you used to have, that big picture is going to tell you, I can no longer afford that subscription to that wonderful premium service for television. I can no longer afford to go out 3 times a week. I can no longer afford that gym membership that I prize so much. Maybe you should put on your shoes and go running on the road for a certain period of time. So it necessitates some lifestyle changes.
So I mean, on your point, Amanda, when you do budget, obviously you'll define the line items quite in detail.
Yes.
What I find useful for me as and my family is that we are quite clear on which ones we need to incur. So I need to pay the mortgage, I need to put food on the table. But we're also quite clear on the ones that we incur because they give us utility, they give us joy. But our livelihoods would not be negatively impacted if we didn't incur those. And focusing on those as a start, looking at those and cutting those down as best as you can, I think is the first start. Obviously, there is a reality that you may cut down all of those, but still not have enough savings to sustain you for a period of time. Then you need to look at downscaling even more. Reducing, instead of renting a 5-bedroom house, maybe you go to a 3-bedroom house. Instead of driving your GTI, maybe you then go downscale to a Polo. So these are the things that you need to think about and explore when you're going through a financial kind of difficulties. And just one more point, it's daunting.
Yes,
It's
that's where I was
really
going.
daunting.
It is.
Because not all of us go through these events on a regular basis. So generally we don't know where to start, how to start. And to Amanda's point, a financial advisor in this time is critical because they'll help you through this process. They're well versed in understanding budgets, savings, and the different vehicles that you potentially have money in, and then say, okay, based on this is what you should be doing. Plus, they hold you accountable, which I think is really, really important.
Is it not difficult to have that sort of discussion with yourself? I think about it now myself, that I think I asked someone to look at my bank statements once and show me the budget, show me where my money has gone. And I was not impressed with what I saw. To be honest with you, it put me in a place of shame where I was like, I'm spending too much money on this. Whereas the next month I didn't do it again because I just didn't like how it was. So you get different types of people that are on a spectrum of where they are financially. You get those people that don't mind spending 500,000 rand on something because, oh, well, why not? But you also get those people that are living paycheck to paycheck. Even worse than those people are the ones that are using debt to service their day-to-day living. So how do we navigate that? What are some of the principles we need to look out for about acquiring some sort of debt or managing money? Because for some people right now, they're going to have to take on debt in order to live, to put food on the table. How does that work?
So I think it's important to understand debt. There is what I call good debt, which is debt that you'll get. So you'll go to a bank and ask for a loan to build a business. That can be seen as good debt because over a long time, over the long term, the business should hopefully do well and then will pay off the debt. But to your point, there's really bad debt where you go access this debt to meet living costs. In the normal course of events, we would recommend against that. The your living costs must be met by your income that you earn. However, the reality is South Africans generally are not good savers across the country. And if now your income is being impacted, you may have to resort to debt, as you've mentioned.
Yeah.
What I think is important is to partner with a responsible and reputable lending provider.
Yeah.
Okay.
They'll look at your situation, they'll look at your credit record, and then they'll grant you a loan to help you get back onto your feet.
Okay.
It is for this reason also why credit records are so important. To pay on time if you've got any debt, because you never know when you may need a very good credit record.
Yeah.
If you've got a really bad one, you're blacklisted, you won't be able to access this debt. The other point that I think is important to emphasize is, there's this temptation that you may want to go to a loan shark. You may,
But I mean, the loan shark is the easier guy. I mean, he's not going to ask me, for paperwork, for affidavits. He's not asking for all of that. The only thing he wants is my ID.
But the difference between the loan shark and the reputable, responsible lending providers is that those loan sharks, firstly, because they're not formalized, they charge ridiculously high.
They're not regulated.
Okay.
So to put it different, in terms of the interest rates, I was doing some reading and I was speaking to a few people. They could charge as much as 100% per year in interest.
Sure.
That's the first one.
So I think let's take a step back.
Yeah.
What does interest rate mean? Okay. So here I am, I'm Musa, I need 5,000 Rand because my family's hungry, and Brajo, who has said to me, he will loan me this cash, says he wants to charge me an interest rate of 25%. It's only 25%. So what does that mean?
It effectively means that on the 1,000 Rand that you're getting from Brajo, you'll have, when you pay back to Brajo, it will have grown by 25%. Okay. So instead of paying 1,000 Rand, you potentially will pay 1,250 to Brajo
as payback. So interest is a plus.
Yes.
So when I pay back the money, it's gonna come back more. So you're saying that we need to look out for what interest we're being charged.
Exactly.
It's the cost of borrowing.
The cost of borrowing.
Yes.
Okay.
Because the higher the interest rate, the more you have to pay back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So effectively, you need to, with a good credit record, the banks will look at it and then charge you an interest rate depending on the risk that you present to them.
Okay.
So the better the credit rate record, the lower the interest rate. The worse, the higher the interest rate, because the banks will look and say, Ish, the chance of this guy paying us back, the risk of not getting our money is higher. Therefore, we must charge him higher to protect ourselves as a business.
But here's a question. We've been hearing on the news that the MPC has met and they've decided that this thing is going down by 50 basis points and 1.5.
Yeah.
But that means interest rates right now are low. So why shouldn't I go get a loan?
So if you go to a reputable lending provider, they will use the low interest rates.
Okay.
Right? But if you go to Brajon doesn't care what
the MPC has said.
The repo is, the prime rate is.
Yeah.
Brajon cares about making money.
Yeah.
So Brajon will keep on charging you the 60, 100% interest rate because that's what he's used to.
Okay.
So that's why it's important to partner with a reputable lending provider because they will charge you interest rate based on what the interest rates are in the industry at a particular point in time.
And essentially, I mean, interest rate is you're just throwing money away.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the point is that, yes, you need help, but you also need to be very, very wise about where your money goes because it's hard to earn this money. So every single cent must be accounted for. And all professional advisors will tell you, always pay off the highest interest debt first because that is true. And practically it takes your money. So that's why you want to cut down on that as quickly as you possibly can.
So look, we're saying a lot of things right now, and I think I'm intermittently going to stop us so that the people at home that are watching, that are ready to send their questions, are also able to write down and jot down some practical tips.
Yes.
And we've said, one, be honest with where you stand financially, right?
100%.
So this is a very
Yeah.
important thing. Two is, I think it's in the subtext of what we're saying here is look at all the debts that you have and
Yes.
assess where the interest is on that debt.
Yes.
How much you owe, what interest you're being charged, and all those sort of things, because that gives you a clearer reality of where you
your
actually
money's going.
financially stand.
Yep.
Because if you're earning 10,000 Rand, but you're having to service 15,000 Rand worth of debt
Yeah.
and expenses, it makes it a pointless exercise.
Yes.
Okay, good. So look, I'm going to move on to the next little bit. And I want us to talk about people that we have to support. So
Yes.
we understand that we don't live by ourselves. We live within a community.
Yes.
We are one collective. We're groups of people that, you know, through these hard times need to be resilient.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to look for resilience or be resilient yourself when your neighbor, and this neighbor is your cousin,
Yeah.
your mother, your father,
yeah.
is going through a tough time, that financially they're not so great at this point in time.
Yes.
How do we managing our money, but also helping out? Because we live in this culture of wound.
Yeah.
So Amanda, how do we navigate the space? And I think you touched on it a little bit earlier on as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm a big believer in you know, the concept of Ubuntu first and foremost.
Okay.
However, I'm also I like to rattle the cage a bit and say, you know, how far does that go? And the question is, you know, we all have boundaries. We should have boundaries.
Yeah.
Ooh,
And the
okay.
boundaries are, who are those people in my ecosystem that I absolutely cannot not look after?
Okay.
So for example, for me, my mother cannot go to bed hungry. That's that's it, settled. So I will always make sure that I can look after her. But I have the means to be able to do that. There are a lot of people who are expected to do so much more with very little. And there's very little to go around to begin with.
Sure.
So it's striking that balance of not just being, because remember, money you didn't work for, Musa, is really nice. Hey,
Yo,
it tastes
the best.
good.
It's the best kind of
It's
money.
the best kind of money. So it is therefore no surprise that there's so many people who constantly knock on someone's door wanting more and more money. I'm saying do it if you have the means and are able to and you want to, because it's the right thing to do and you've decided that's what you want to do. However, we must balance the needs of yourself as well as those in your care. So for example, I am a mother to 3 children that go to school. I quite happily want to help people, but I can't help everyone because my resources also only go so far. And I don't want to perpetuate a situation where I constantly look after others and therefore have nothing to look after myself and nothing to pass on to my children. Because then all we end up having is this constant perpetuation of the status quo where our children and their children must constantly look after us. And that for me, I think we have to be clear about what the boundaries are. And have healthy boundaries around money. Don't feel guilty. We operate from a place of guilt. If chances are in your community, in your home, you're the one that made that is successful, that made it, but you have so much burden yourself. You know, you are caving under your own burden. So it's important to start recognizing that for what it is. And also, I'm quite happy to help people that want to help themselves. You know, because then we're not creating a perpetual state of people who are dependent on others. You know, so I'll give money to start something or you know, help a family member go and sell something at the corner. I mean, I used to stand at the corners of traffic lights dishing out pamphlets just to get myself through school. It still baffles me how many people ask me for money to pay for their school fees and they just sit at home and wait for me to pay for them. So you know, it's a balance. It's a balance.
But I think your point around helping them help themselves is critical.
Yeah.
Because then at least you're ensuring that down the line, your children don't have to help them because they've learned how to help themselves.
Yes,
right?
yes.
It's easier, it's better to buy someone a rod and teach them how to fish than give them the fish, because then at least they can fish indefinitely. And that for me is a kind of as society, the balance that we need to strike. Yes, there are people that may need money to put food on the table, and that's a reality. But also we should encourage all our dependents, when I say dependents, not just immediate, broader families, to say, listen, I will support you as long as over the long term, I can see that you are helping yourself. And I think that's so critical. It's so important.
I want us to look at,
so
at boundaries and what that actually means financially, because one's boundary may not be the same as the other person's.
Yes.
And I think we'll touch on those now. But there is a question that has come in from the people at home. Just wait for the question to come up. I think it is from Fanelwa. Yes, Fanelwa saying that as an academic, what business may I start to earn an extra income? What advice can you give? Thank you. So Fanelwa wanting to know, they're a student, so they have an 8 to 4 technically. How can they start a business to make some sort of money? You slowly alluded to, make a plan, some way, shape, or form, but how do they go about starting a business, even though they are employed elsewhere?
So there's two scenarios. When I was at university, I had to work to get myself through university. I was the missing middle. So I couldn't get a loan because I wasn't poor enough, but I was so poor, my mom couldn't afford full varsity. So from then I started working at coffee shops. I mean, after lectures at Wits, I would go and work at a coffee shop till about midnight and come back to, get some sleep, do my work. So I've always just ever worked. And that's why I reward myself so much now. so it's understanding, and when I started my first business where, I sold flowers to corporates, I used to make flower arrangements. I used to wake up every morning, go to the flower market first. 4 o'clock, I was there to buy fresh flowers, come back and make them, and I was at work by 8:30. So it's understand where the need, where is the opportunity, where is the opportunity. If you're a student, get an extra job. I used to do promotions when the big departmental stores were there. There's always an opportunity to do something. You can be an extra tutor. You can do all of these things. How do you start a business? Starting a business is not just about, I just need extra income. Let me start a business. No, it's what problem are you trying to solve? Who is going to buy that solution from you? Why should they buy it? So the concept of starting a business is another whole discussion. But if you just want to have extra income, which is something I absolutely advocate for, you must have multiple sources of income. Because back to the conversation about interest, if you keep paying interest on things, you don't have that is money you could have been earning interest, a return to you, rather than you paying for that. So there's many different ways. Sell something, I think sometimes people do tend to think some other jobs are beneath them, and they don't want to do the hard stuff. Do the hard stuff, but try and be clear about what problem are you solving for the people, not just for you to make money. Because then I find that way the business really just comes to you because you have a solution and offering.
I'm an academic. I am a corporate person, so I don't have any businesses. But my in-laws recently started a little business, and initially I was a bit skeptical about this initiative. And I asked them all these questions. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Where are your clients going to be and all of that? Because that's how I think.
Like any actuary would do.
Exactly. Before I venture out, I need to have solved all these things, right? And what I've learned in the process is if you've got it within you, just start. The small thing that you can do, you'll find a market to sell it to if you really are passionate about it. What also is important is to appreciate whether you are an entrepreneur, whether it's ingrained in you as an individual, because it comes with a certain risk appetite, or whether you're not. So for example, I know myself, I am not that type of person, but there are people like, this is Amanda, I was chatting to her earlier, who mentioned that, the risk appetite is so important.
They were there.
Exactly.
They're ready to take that risk.
Exactly.
And not everyone is like that. That's why, when people are discouraged from having day jobs, discouraged from working at your 8 to 4 to go pursue this life of entrepreneurship to be a theoretical millionaire is not necessarily the healthy thing to 100%. Do, because you may not thrive off of 100%. Risk. You may not be able to say, you know what, I'm happy with not necessarily paying myself at the end of this month and making sure that my staff is at least settled because I'm waiting for invoices. There's so many different things into it. All right, there's another question from Abuzwa saying that how would you advise unemployed individuals to look into budgeting when one barely makes money? So the typical example we have, young people, unemployed, have some sort of money coming from somewhere. Maybe a parent is giving you 1,000 Rand a month. How do you budget? How do you make that happen?
So I think in that situation, I think it's important to understand where the income is going to come from and the amount potentially of this income. The reality is in South Africa that there is a high unemployment kind of rate. So individuals generally aren't employed, right? But to Sis Amanda's point, you can find ways to generate revenue. You can sell potatoes, you can sell, you know, there are avenues in which you can pursue, which aren't looking at a formal job to start generating this revenue. In understanding this revenue, this income that you earn, it will dictate then what actually can you afford. Obviously, if you are earning 3,000 Rand a month, you're not going to go buy a GTI, for example. And therefore, it's important to understand the situation that you're currently in, and in understanding the situation, then say, what can I afford? And then and sticking to that, sticking to what you can afford. You need to also save. I know it sounds weird, where if you're earning 3,500 a month, how can you live on that?
Yeah.
But every cent that you save, it could be 100 Rand, it could be 200 Rand. Every cent that you save will benefit you over the long term, because it'll start generating this compound interest that we keep referring to. Just to make it more practical, what this compound interest is, take a policeman. We've got a policeman in Limpopo who recently inherited a rural farm from his father.
Okay.
He decided to buy one chicken, right? Bought this chicken, and this chicken had 5 eggs. 5 eggs hatched, became chicks, and over a couple of months were then chickens. So he went from having one chicken to 6 chickens. Now just imagine if all 6 then are laying 5 eggs, right? And that's what compound interest is. So regardless of whether you are earning 3.5 or 10,000 Rand, any cent that you can save will benefit you over the long term, because you will benefit from what we call compound interest.
It's easier for something to grow when there's something there
100%.
to build on.
So I believe money must work harder than I do.
Okay. What is it? I mean,
So
we hear this a lot, but what does it mean?
So for me, it's, and this is what it means in my world. Every single cent I have must get a return somehow. Okay. Now, the return isn't always quantitative. So it's not always, I've put in this much, I'll get 10% back. It's, I put it into a charitable organization, or I put it back into creating jobs. For example, in my company, I didn't take dividends for 6 years, just so that I can plow that back into the business and create more jobs. So everybody's, money must work harder than I do is different. However, what it really means is that return, be it quantitative or qualitative, must be clear and tangible. So even if you're only getting pocket money from your parents, I mean, I make an example with our children. We teach our children money lessons. We didn't come from, I personally didn't come from a place where anyone talked to me about money. I had to learn the hard way. You know, those store accounts you get the moment you start working,
there we go.
you know, that credit card. I had to learn the hard way. But now our kids, most kids, you know, who are fortunate enough get an allowance every month. But that allowance you must work for. You must understand where that money comes from. And you must understand where it is. And let me give you, if you want to buy something, you want to buy a gift for your friend, it's their birthday, let's go to the ATM, take out the money, let me show you on a slip how much you now have left. And let me teach you about, this is how much we give you, but this is how much you keep spending. But you know what, if you keep that money long enough in the bank, you get the money, you know? So it gets that basic for us to start getting it right. So whatever money you're getting, however little it is, it must absolutely work for you. When I started my business quickly, the business that I'm currently running now, Uyandiswa, which is a project management consulting business, I took out 80,000 Rands from my pension fund. Now, the actuary here will tell you, don't you dare.
He's already shaking.
But I'm an entrepreneur through and through. I thrive on risk. But I didn't take out 80,000 Rands to go and sit by the beach or fund my living expenses. No, it was to start a business that I turned into multiples of millions a couple of years later. So again, it's about understanding what your risk profile is, but the money must, and by the way, I've since paid back. So good debt is taking money from where you shouldn't and using it to make more money. And that's really perfect.
Okay, so there is another question, this one from Anonymous, and saying, lovely conversations. Money is a delicate topic to start with between couples. How can one make it an open discussion between young couples? And considering that young individuals are more exposed to many money mistakes early in marriage. So here we're talking about couples that have come together.
Yes.
Theoretically, there are jobs and you guys need to have a money conversation.
Yes.
How do we do that? Abulela?
I'll use my experience because this question really resonates with me.
Did you type this question?
No. Where's my phone? When myself and my fiance were planning to get married, we went on this course called marriage counseling, right? And inherently in that conversation, we were asked to start being open about money, start being open about what we incur and how we'll operate the household after we get married. It was really difficult for me. Really, really difficult because since I started working, no one came to inquire or ask how I'm spending my money. All of a sudden, there is this individual who now wants to get into the detail, right? Which initially I struggled with. But I think what's important is understand that this union between the two of you is in order for it to be successful, in order for you to remain together for a really long time, you need to be honest and transparent about these things. The first few conversations will be difficult, but once you start having those first few conversations and once you're really transparent, regardless how bad or good the situation is, it will help you. It will help you over the long term in your marriage. So, I mean, honesty, and also being in it together, understanding that you are both in it together, I think is important. I mean, you hear stories, horror stories about people that have been together for a really long time, didn't speak about finances, and something happens to, say, the breadwinner, and all of a sudden everything falls apart, right? So in order to also protect yourself in that relationship, you need to force the conversation, call it. But again, once you start having it, once you start being transparent, it becomes a lot easier.
I also think, I mean, I think every newlywed or every couple that probably lives together will say something about this because we all come from very different points of view when it comes to money, and our experiences with money and our attitudes towards money is driven by many different things. And I think it's so important to understand our attitudes towards money. So the psychology of money, the psychology of wealth, what drives you? And where are you coming from? You know, if you've come from a family where you used to have and suddenly you don't have, chances are your point of view, suddenly you don't have and you've had to live with that aftermath. Your point of view is different from someone who's come from, you know, abundance. So it's trying to kind of find each other in a certain, in a middle ground, if I may put it that way. But understanding boundaries as well. I'll give you an example. When we got married, one of these fancy things that couples do is a joint account. And I can tell you, my husband kicked me out of that account so quickly, because he's like, what are all these debit orders? My husband is the kind that does not like any debit orders. Nothing should come out of his account without him paying it. I'm the person that's like, that's convenient. Put the, you know, take it out of it. He's like, no, he freaks out at that. So we had different habits, different way, we got different outlook. And we had to find a way. I actually said, actually, it's perfectly fine because I also don't want to have to keep explaining myself to you. So you take back your account. We're not joint anymore. You take yours, I keep mine. But you know what? We've got joint expenses in the home. I also think it's important to respect our partners as human beings in the relationship, and not people that you suddenly must dictate to and tell what to do. You work for your money. You want to buy an expensive pair of AirPods, please go ahead and enjoy it because I don't want you to get in my way when I want to buy my things. So, but it's understanding that you've got a family vision of your financial goals.
I mean, money conversations are difficult with yourself. I mean, this is what we've been highlighting. To be honest with yourself about why you're spending 10,000 Rand at a certain place or why you're spending 3,000 Rand at a certain place is tricky within itself. Now having to factor in another human being who earns a different amount of money, doesn't earn what you thought they earned before, you know, all those sort of dynamics. And I think what you guys have highlighted is that the honesty needs to exist. Transparency needs to be there, and then a plan needs to be made for the future to say, right, if you and I are coming together, I will take care of the bond, or you take care of the cars, you pay for the what. It's quite interesting. All right.
Sorry, one more point. What also helps those conversations is to bring a third party. because the third party will also help you understand your situation and then plan for your
Navigate,
financial life goals, right?
Yeah.
So financial advisors, family financial advisors are I think are really, really important because now you're planning for the future together and not as separate individuals.
Yeah.
And that also helps. That definitely does help.
Okay, another question that has come in from Colin. Colin here saying that I think he's touching a bit on downgrading, saying that downgrading for some people can end up relegating the entire family to subsistence shackles of poverty. Is this the only solution? Is downgrading the only solution?
I don't necessarily believe it's the only solution, but it is a solution if you are in a difficult position.
Yes. Okay.
And you can't continue as though nothing has changed. If you've lost your income or your income has been reduced, you simply cannot carry on as though it hasn't. It's that denial thing I was talking about.
Yeah.
And downgrading actually also allows you the opportunity to reset, you know, to just pause a bit and relook what you're dealing with. And downgrading could be, you know, you downgrade from a bigger car. He's got a thing with a GTR. He keeps talking about a GTR.
No, I've always wanted one.
I don't want to say, I think he's always wanted one.
Always wanted
But
one.
the actor in him is like, do you have to spend? Get your GTR. You live, you know. But the point is that only you understand your situation better than anybody, because people can be very secretive about money affairs.
True.
And only you know how much you're struggling.
True.
And it is a gift to yourself, not just today, for the future, to actually say, you know what, maybe temporarily, let me hold back and take a full view of my position. You can always go back to those things.
I think the thing that makes downgrading a bad thing is pride.
Yeah, really.
Is the pride that is attached to having things.
Yes.
It's consumerism, it's materialism,
What
and things
will
like
people
that.
say?
And what will people say if
Yeah.
I don't drive
Yeah.
my GTI anymore?
Yeah.
I want to talk about generational wealth, a term that we've all heard,
Yeah.
that we like throwing around because it sounds sexy when we say it. I want to create generational wealth.
Yes.
But what are the practical bits that we need to take into consideration when thinking about generational wealth?
Sure. I mean, when you think about generational wealth, most people think about money in the bank. Most people think about, you know, starting a business, growing the business to be this big, large, gigantic revenue generating organization, which is fair. But the reality is, not all of us, it's ingrained in us to be able to be entrepreneurs, to start these businesses. So there are different avenues in which you can explore to start creating generational wealth. The first that I always talk about is investing in your children. I fundamentally believe that investment in your children will enable them to then be self-sustainable and start generating this generational wealth that we call.
Okay.
But in an insurance context,
So what does that mean? Does that mean I send them to Hilton and pay 300,000 Rand a year? Or what
you
does that mean?
invest in their education.
Okay.
Yes.
Whatever you can afford. Try get them the best education that you can afford based on your personal circumstances.
Okay.
It may be Hilton, but it also may be the private school in your neighborhood, or maybe a public school within your neighborhood. It's what you can afford.
Is it extra lessons? Is it me paying internet so that my kids can access YouTube and do that mathematics?
It could be.
Okay.
Giving them the avenues to explore and broaden their perspective is investing in them.
Okay.
So whilst we talk about formal education, there are also those informal, things that the kids can be part of. I mean, I'll use you, Dr. Musa. You were YoTV at some point, right?
Yes.
And that was part of the education, I believe.
Okay. I hear you.
So there is that education component of it, but there are certain financial products that one can leverage to start creating this generational wealth.
Okay.
What we see in society, especially in this time where there's so much uncertainty, where this COVID pandemic has made it really, really uncomfortable, is that a lot of families are able to provide dignified funerals for their beloved, family members, their breadwinners, right? But then directly after that, it knocks them into a world of poverty.
True.
There are products like life insurance, where effectively by taking life insurance, you ensure that your family is protected regardless of what happens to you in the future. And that life insurance will pay out a lump sum to your family to ensure that food gets put on the table, to ensure that, your kids can continue to be educated, bills paid, and all of that, right? On top of that, imagine R1 million payout to any family in South Africa at this current point in time is life-changing.
Yeah.
And that's just the start of generational wealth.
I want to talk about life insurance because we've heard it, because there's funeral cover and there's life insurance. These are all things that we hear about. We see the ads playing on TV every day. But what does it actually mean? Does that mean are you paying me to be alive? What's going on?
So let's maybe talk about life cover as a start.
Okay.
Life cover is essentially an insurance product which says, should anything happen to you, should you pass on unexpectedly or expectedly, we will pay out as insurance company an amount to you, to your beneficiaries, to the people.
Am I paying every month for this?
You pay every month.
Okay.
You pay a premium every month to us as the insurer, and we'll cover you should anything happen to you.
Oh, okay.
So that's how generally insurance works.
Yeah.
With funeral cover, it's capped, so you can only get a certain maximum cover amount of 100,000 rand.
Okay.
Whereas life cover, it can go into the millions.
Okay.
And it meets different needs. Funeral cover is there to ensure that you get a dignified funeral. You're able to provide a dignified funeral for your extended family.
Yes.
Whereas life cover is there to give you peace of mind that regardless of what happens to you as an individual, your family will be taken care of.
So, I mean, now I see how this pattern is coming together. You're knitting a quilt now, in that you've initially started off by saying that, you know, people have the luxury. Some people have the luxury of having businesses that they can hand over to their children. That's me as a 70-year-old man. I have passed, or I'm not, you know, I don't feel like working the business anymore. Here at Jabu, take the business, you now run it, and you're able to create wealth in that sense. But you're now saying that you're also able to create some sort of financial well-being and health for your family by paying a monthly premium to an insurance provider, who will then, in the event of your death, pay out a lump sum to you. And therefore, you can then pay for the education. You could potentially start a business if someone has got the risk appetite and things such as that, which is money that you wouldn't have had in the past.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Your views on generational wealth?
I always believe that we must start with the end in mind. So when I say start with the end in mind, it's what sort of life would you like to see for your children long after you are gone?
Okay.
And again, this goes back to, you know, these generational challenges that we find ourselves in, keep perpetuating, where our children have to look after us, we're in our old age.
True.
It all goes back to when did you start, and what did you do, and what did you not do? So I mean, I started my first job, I was 21 years old. I earned 3,500 rands. I started putting away 350 rands a month towards my retirement annuity. Now, I didn't even have children then. And that has escalated over time, because the more your income grows, the more you can put away. But what that does is I therefore can now also mention my children as beneficiaries to my estate, or to my retirement annuity or pension fund, or etc. So there are a lot of things. You don't have to have come from a family of trust funds to have generational wealth. You can actually make sure that you deliberately do that. So instead of going to buy a beautiful shoe that's got red bottoms, and pay 6,000 rands or 11,000 rands for that, you can use that money towards putting away or buying and investing in products that your children can inherit. And the aim, so when I say start with the end in mind, I never want my children to suffer when I'm gone. I don't want their children to suffer when I'm gone. So it's my responsibility to make sure that my children don't have to look after me. So I'm okay, I'm sorted, I invest. But what that means is if as I'm taking care of my own needs now and for the long term, I could drop dead here tomorrow. My children get to carry on. They don't have to be taken out of school because they can't afford the fees anymore, and et cetera, and et cetera. So there's a lot of things that we can do. But adding on to the education part, we must teach children about money. We must teach them
financial education.
They must be intimate with money. They must understand how money is their best friend, not the evil that we were brought up to believe it is. And we must teach them what values surround that, because you can do all of these things and leave them an amazing legacy, plenty generational wealth, and they squander it in a heartbeat because they don't know how to manage it. So there's so much more to it, but we must always have the end in mind. And when you have the end in mind, then you go back to the starting block and say, okay, if this is the life I would like to live for my children and their children, what should I be doing today, every single day? So instead of overspending on things, take that money, put it in a unit trust. You mentioned them as the beneficiary, you know? So there's quite a lot of those things outside of things like business and etc.
There are definitely a lot of personal tools and business tools. And I think that's the discussion that we've been having today, is that in as much as, you know, you may be an entrepreneur at home, but it's also quite personal, that even as an entrepreneur, you're paying yourself a salary, that even you as a person that works in corporate, they pay you a salary, that as an informally employed person, you should pay yourself something so that there are means and ways in which you're starting to budget, that you're setting financial boundaries, that you're able to have some sort of, system in place as a backup should something happen to you. It's actually quite interesting. Another question, I think the last one that we'll take from everyone watching now is that, is it mission impossible for a blacklisted person to negotiate with creditors? Is it mission impossible or not?
It most certainly is not, if I may step in. But that's where he did say earlier, Abu did say earlier that, it ends up, it might just cost you more than it would cost a person that's got a better credit score. So, financial institutions rate everyone based on their credit scoring, and how you get to that scoring is how have you been conducting your own financial affairs? Are you paying on time? Have you had any debit orders bouncing, et cetera, et cetera? So all of the things that I said even earlier, if you are in a jam, do not bury your head in the sand, because it's going to come back to bite you. And a lot of people don't have immediate cash to buy a house cash or a car cash, or, to pay an annual for your kids' school fees.
Yeah, one time.
So at some point you will need some kind of debt. And if you don't have that, if you've unfortunately missed payments and you eventually got blacklisted and you didn't make arrangements with people, it is not mission impossible. It is just going to cost you an insane amount.
What should a blacklisted person do? So right now, as I said, my credit scoring, I don't know what the lowest is, but I'm blacklisted. I can't take debt, but I want to make a plan because I've just gotten a job and on a payoff so that I'm able to afford things on credit later on in life. What should I do?
So I think it's important to what Amanda said, is to engage with creditors.
So these are people that you owe money?
Yes, people that you owe money. Engage with them and paint a picture of where you currently are. Make them understand that you want to help service this debt, you want to pay these monthly repayments, and see what you can work with. Right? Once you're able to start going on a journey where you are able to start paying off this debt, it should improve your credit rating over the long term. To Sister Amanda's point, the reality is that it will cost you more if you want to access debt, because you have displayed that you are unable to pay on a regular basis and pay on time. So these are the things that you can do and things that you need to consider. I think what is critical, what is really, really important, is to try not get to that point where you're blacklisted. I think it's important to pay as best as you can on time. Where you are struggling, I think it's important to go engage with the person that you owe money and explain to them what the current situation is. Because the minute it gets to that point, it's a lot difficult digging yourself out of the hole. I think the last point on this is partner with someone. Partner with a financial advisor. They will help guide and help navigate you through this uncertainty. Because the reality is, to my point, financial matters aren't things that, as South Africans, we're kind of good at. We aren't things that we know really, really well. So partner with someone who can help you navigate that terrain. I think is critical.
And isn't it that, I know a lot of bank accounts come with financial advice and people don't use it. They don't know that it's there. And often people think, oh, that's going to cost me a lot of money.
So it doesn't cost you. You don't pay them big pots of money to give you the financial advice. Yes, they do generate commission should they help you solve with some products and all of that. But you're not paying it directly to them. I think on that point, most South Africans, at least I didn't know where to get a financial advisor until I started working in an insurance company. And most South Africans, I would assume, are similar to me. If you, as someone listening to this, need financial advice, if you can go visit one of our 120 branches across South Africa. There'll be a financial advisor at a Metropolitan branch. Or also you can go to metropolitan.co.za. There'll be a form that pops up there. You fill in your details, we'll contact you. So financial advice is there. It's available. You just need to find the ways to get access.
I think we avoid it because it comes in an 087 number. We see it and we're like, ooh.
But also, you must open up about your situation.
That's
so
true.
people don't always want to do that, but it's there to help you. But I must say something about being blacklisted quickly. The dire impact of being blacklisted, it's not just, in terms of your credit score and your creditors. Large financial services organizations, and I know this because in my company, we employ people, they do not hire people who have who have been blacklisted. And for you to be employed by a bank or an insurance company when you have been blacklisted is a tall order. You have to produce literally like a blood sample, okay, for them
It's
to
that invasive.
to even consider you, because what it means is that unfortunately, whether you caused it or you didn't cause it, the end result is the same.
Yeah.
You cannot be trusted in a financial institution, even if your job has nothing to do with finances. And that's where sometimes, you know, you get to negotiate with a client and say this role, it has got nothing to do with finance. However, this is how serious people should take this. You are also depriving of yourself of jobs.
Yeah, an opportunity. In
Opportunities in these large organizations who are typically the biggest hirers outside of government.
It's going to be that very basic check that they're going to do.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's look at the last question. I know I said the previous one was the last, but I find this one very interesting. Abuz was saying that, this is for you, Abulela, saying that, would you say it's time as Black families to start taking life covers as generational wealth? Because some families, that is as close as they can get to that sort of wealth, you know, to that volume of wealth after someone's death in the family. We say that it's time that we, you know, get financial advisors when these life covers pay out. So it's a two-pronged question: where should we get these covers because it creates wealth? And also, two, should we get advice when it pays out?
Yeah, I think the first question is yes. I think for the longest time, Black families were using funeral cover as a way to meet this life cover need. They'll have multiple funeral policies.
Yes.
Right? But what you'll find is if you sum up the premiums that they pay for the cover amount, it's a big amount.
Yeah.
And if you got life cover for the same cover amount, so if you had 10,000 or 200,000 worth of funeral and 200,000 worth of life cover, it's cheaper getting life cover.
Life cover, yeah.
So certainly, I think as Black families, we need to firstly have open and honest conversations about these things, but get life cover to ensure that our families are protected should anything happen to us.
Sure.
But the point around after when you pass on and the payout and it's nice times, financial advice is key.
Yeah.
Financial advice is so important to help understand your situation as the beneficiary and help say, if you got these financial goals, if these are the things that you want to achieve in your life, then rather spend this money this way.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, especially in South Africa, a big lump sum it can be life-changing, but there's also the GTIs that you can spend them on.
But the truth is, if you've never seen that amount of money before, you need to be helped just to manage it and make it go a long way. You know?
It's and I think an important thing to note is that life cover creates an element of generational wealth, yes. But it's actually a loss of income. That if you had a 50-year-old parent that was working somewhere, you're no longer able to claim or get that salary per month. So this is actually a salary, can be set up in that way to pay you so that it doesn't feel like this breadwinner has been lost. Guys, thank you for joining me. But very quickly before we leave, some quick summaries on what we need to do to make 2021 a financially strong year so that not individually alone, but collectively we are just better this year.
Yes, I really think that if COVID hasn't, the impact of the COVID pandemic hasn't petrified you into changing your money habits, I don't know what will, because this has been such a shock to the system. We didn't see 2020 coming, but we saw 2021 coming, okay? And we should have expected, and we should expect that the hard times are gonna go well into the next couple of years. Because remember now what has happened, where there's been loss, people have then gone and dipped into their savings, dipped into their future monies, which means we're now perpetuating the problem, which means people will probably have to work longer. You know, instead of retiring at 60 or 65, you might retire at 70 or 75. So the impact is quite dire. However, you know, we can change it. It's going to happen.
Okay.
Not all hope is lost, but I hope that we change our habits and understand that everything we plow today is what will be ripped in the future to come.
Very quickly.
5 things. Budget, reduce debt, start saving, get life cover, get a financial advice.
Sure.
Simple as that.
Wow. Okay. Well, I didn't expect it to happen that quickly. I know I said quickly, but geez. All right. Thank you. Well, listen, we've come to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for joining us. And we really hope that we put some financial thinking tips into your brain and really inspired you to sit down, analyze how much money you're making, where you stand financially, where the debt is, and all those sorts of things so that you can get stronger and be better in 2021. We hope that these these masterclasses that have gotten you stronger for 2021 and that you'll continue to be the best that you can be. Stay tuned for more. From me, Musa Mthombeni, we'll see you when we see you.